So that's what kick-started a different level for me. That's when I really started to suffer. For the first time in my life, I self-harmed. I never thought I'd say that. I genuinely did, because I blamed myself for everything that happened. And for the first time, I came along to the general thought that I didn't want to continue with my life.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Total Sport, and today we've got something completely different for you. I'm joined by a very, very good mate of mine, and That Was to Believers podcast co-host, Mr. Alex Jones. How are you, mate? How you doing?
I'm not too bad, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, and today we're just going to have a talk about something very serious, something that I wanted to actually broadcast in conjunction with the stuff we've done with I Hear You charity and their 3-peak challenge, with documentary coming out soon. I thought it would be really good to just have a chat to Alex about his journey and what he's going through at the moment, because obviously it's been a real tough time for you in the last few weeks. Last few weeks mainly. But obviously going back as well. So I know you've done some written pieces about your story as well, which is very, very brave as well. So before we get into anything, mate, do you want to just sort of explain what happened and what caused this?
Yeah, it's quite hard, because I think that my mental health story in general, I don't know to what depths to go into, but it's something that I've struggled with a lot. So I'll briefly kind of run over the history for people who haven't read what I've written, which I assume be the majority of the listeners here. When I was young, I moved to Holland at age 3, and that was kind of quite a daunting thing, because you go into a different country as a kid, completely different culture, and you grow up there trying to adapt to that. I didn't speak the language. I didn't speak a word for a year that I was there, and trying to shift into that was really difficult. And the truth is, I loved it. I loved living in Holland. I think it's brilliant. But I struggled with that a lot. I found that quite hard at times. And then transitioning back into living in England was quite difficult. I moved back when I was about 10 years old. And I found that transition quite hard. You're shifting culture, and that's quite a scary thing to do for such a young kid. And just when I'd kind of got to grips with that, with everything I was coping with, I came down with something called chronic fatigue syndrome, which basically means that I had a much weaker immune system, and I was much more prone to getting very tired and very ill. And at its worst, I was struggling with that to the extent where I missed months of school. I was away from friends months at a time. Struggled with that for years. And again, this was something that I took a while to fight off, and it's something that kind of was my first experience of struggling with mental health. And I think that's quite scary, because again, I was a kid. I was struggled with this from age 11, like really badly, from age 11 till 14. And when I moved to secondary school, again, it was a situation where it was a kind of a new thing for me. And that first year that I had at secondary school was probably one of the best years I've had, with friends that I loved. I genuinely felt like I'd finally come to grips with everything. I fit in. And without going into huge amounts of detail, I made friends with someone, really close friends. It was great. And it was kind of the first time I'd relied on someone properly. And in the end, that kind of spiraled badly. I must have been about 15 at the time. And it just was, it really shook me mentally. That was when I really started to struggle, and I started to deal with thoughts I'd never really dealt with before. I started to get anxiety. I started to not openly think about, but kind of often have thoughts put in my head by other people of things like self-harm and suicide. And I mean, it's strange looking back on it, because I don't kind of, despite everything that goes on, and not having the support that I needed from friends, we were children. I kind of get it, and it sucks that it's happened, but I understand that. And I struggled with that until I moved to sixth form. And when I moved to sixth form, the first 6 months of that, again, I found that hard. I found that transition difficult for 6 months, up until the time that I met my girlfriend. And we were very, very close. It was a lot closer than I think many people's relationships are. And I think that was important, because she struggled too a lot. She found a lot of things really hard. She had a lot of issues in the past, and a lot of issues with anxiety and depression. I won't go into all the details about that, but she found things hard, and I reached out and I tried to care. And the thing was that we were there for each other, and we were properly in love. It's weird saying that, but it's true. And we were together for 3 years, which is kind of, having that support and that break away from suffering, depression, anxiety, and all those feelings for so long. That was pretty much the best 3 years that I had, especially since moving to England. We went on holiday, I think, 4 or 5 times. Became very close to the family. They always looked out for me. And it became like a really important part of my life. And then this year at university, with COVID and my current health issues, and with trying to deal with living on your own in a house, or not on your own, but away from family in a house, with trying to focus on second year of university, online, face to face, I started to suffer depression. And it was, I'd had it before. I'd suffered it at least 2 times in my life where I felt depressed, and I kind of locked myself away. I didn't want to reach out. I didn't want to talk to my family. I didn't think they deserved to have that pressure put on them. I didn't talk to my girlfriend because I thought she was busy. I mean, she's at one of the best universities in the world, if not best. So having that all go on, I thought I just needed to keep this to myself. And that was dangerous, because I felt worse. I felt more depressed. And so eventually again, I won't go into the details because I don't think it's fair, but she told me one day that she wanted to split. And the way that it went down, in just kind of the most heartless and brutal way, was what I struggled with. And kind of having all of that ripped away was what I found really hard. Someone who has properly been there for 3 years, and I've tried to do as much as I could. And I've go into detail with that on the pieces. You can find on my Twitter or wherever, or if you know me on my Facebook, they're all there. I go into the detail there of, how much I tried to do, and having all that ripped away was it was just horrible, especially in the way that it happened. Kind of after all that time, being cast out as someone that was, not worth it anymore, and that was, I was lied to. I was kind of put in a horrible position in that way. So that's what kick-started a different level for me. That's when I really started to suffer. For the first time in my life, I self-harmed. I never thought I'd say that. I genuinely did, because I blamed myself for everything that happened. And for the first time, I came along to the general thought that I didn't want to continue with my life. I never took steps into that, but those thoughts were there. Those panic attacks were there. And I'm back at home now. I'm on antidepressants, and I'm taking steps to that. But that's something that I'm really struggling with for the first time. And it's kind of a very scary and daunting thing. And the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing, talking here, reaching out with posts, is because I know that there's a lot of people out there who struggle with that. And I think it's really important to make this 100% clear that they're not the only ones. And I want to show them how I try and cope. I don't always cope, but I want to make it clear that I'm not the only one. You're not the only one. If you are struggling, whoever it is, so many people struggle with this. I think that's really important to make clear.
Yeah, it sort of got me a little bit choked up in the middle of that, mate, to be honest. Because, you know, in the times that I've known you, and the times that, you know, you would never have guessed, you know, you would never, and I'm sure people who know you more would never have guessed about what was going through your mind. And that's what makes it such a dangerous, well, problem in that respect, is that no one can tell, no one can help unless you have the brave courage to speak out about it. So what made you, even going through this situation, feel like, yeah, I can still help other people here? What made you feel like, you know, even though you're stuck inside dealing with your own problems, be able to just write these things, which I've read all of them, and it's like, write these things and think, you know, I can actually help someone else here? What was your first thought about that?
I think I'm, maybe, at least the people that I know or that I've spoken to, I'm in a rare, I guess, unfortunate situation that I've suffered it a lot, and I'm only 20 years old. I've struggled with these problems, and some things I learn how to overcome and adapt to, and some things I don't. And, you know, I think that it's quite hard to suddenly change all of that, to change how I'm feeling. I don't think it's something that's done overnight. I think it's a process, um, especially when it's something that's happened kind of so heartlessly and brutally as it has with me. And I think that that I the way that I focus on it is that I think it's worth telling my story as long as I can be open about it. I feel comfortable doing that. I think, having dealt with it personally for long enough, I think it's worth doing that. And I don't think that if I can do that, I don't think I should just keep it quiet. You know, I now know that it is better to be open and honest about these things, and I want other people to know that it's okay to be open and honest about these things, because you're not going to make things better, at least without talking to those people closest to you to make that next step.
So going forward with yourself, what steps will you be taking to try and make sure, well, there's no guarantee that this won't happen again, but what will make sure that you're able to recover as best you can, and try and make sure that, you know, your life can be as what it can be, and in the happiest moments of your life you can relive those and make it even better?
It's quite difficult because, you know, having suffered, I guess, three kind of major stints of depression since I've been in the UK, you definitely learn that you can't prevent it 100%. You can't stop these things from happening. You know, if it was down to me, I wouldn't have suffered these things. I wouldn't have had any of this thing happen. If it was me in my girlfriend's position, for example, I would never have let this happen. Sometimes it's not down to you. So there is a sense, I think, for sure, that you have to have that sense of inevitability, but you also have to have resilience about it. I think that you have to be open and honest with people and how you're feeling. I know that's quite difficult. We know each other through football. A lot of my friends I know through football, and I still think that despite all the work done, the incredible work done by the likes of Mind and all the men's mental health charities and all the mental health charities in general, there is a stigma about it. There is still a sense for a lot of people, and especially for me in the past included, that you don't talk out, you know, mates you meet at the pub and watch football with, you don't reach out and talk to them. I think that's really important that changes, and I hope that for me, in order to make things better, I can do that. Being open and honest means you can get help. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be on antidepressants. I wouldn't be at home right now in a safe space with my family. So I think that's very important, being open and being honest.
What would you say? Because obviously you said that you helped your ex-girlfriend deal with certain issues. What would you say to people who don't suffer, or are lucky enough to not suffer from these issues, and how would they deal with people who do, and what's the right things to say, what's the right things to do for people who are dealing with it with other people in these situations?
I mean, I was in a lucky situation where, with the 3 years I was with my girlfriend, I didn't struggle. I didn't have issues because I always went around with that kind of safety net that I had her there. To be honest, she was the one who found things harder. I don't think it's fair to go into the details, but there were issues there. There were a lot of problems. And the good thing with us being together is that she felt she could be open about them. I don't think she had been in the past. And one thing that I've found from writing pieces, when I first told my story, especially when I put it on Facebook, I got so many messages from people saying, I mean, a lot of them, thanking me for saying that, and I shouldn't have to do that. I think it's just something that I felt was right to do in the situation. But also a lot of people telling me that they suffered too, and a lot of them saying that they didn't feel comfortable to reach out. So I think if you're lucky enough not to be in a situation where you struggle with mental health, you always have to be aware of it. You always have to be conscious of it being around you. For starters, it can hit you at any time. Something like that can come and you have to face it at any point. So you always have to be careful of that. There's every chance saying, it's awful to talk about. For example, a loved one dying, you could be free and happy for your entire life, but something like that could bring you down, and that's something to be really wary of and know what to do when that comes to you. But also, when people are happy on the surface, when people don't look like they're struggling, like I try to come across when I suffer with it, and when a lot of people do, that's when you need to ask questions. How are things? Have you been okay? Have you been out to see people? It's really difficult, especially during the lockdown, especially with everything going on in the world with the virus. It's really difficult. So I think it's so important that we check up on each other and that we look out for each other, even if we're, at least coming across as happy, cheerful people, because it's so easy to cover that up, and it's so dangerous as well.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Well, I think that's all we need really from you, and thank you so much for sharing your story. Um, it's not the sort of thing we usually have on here in terms of we try and maintain sort of a upbeat nature, but this sort of situation is so important. Everyone at home watching this is so important. If you're feeling down, talk to people you trust, talk to your family, talk to the Samaritan's number that we'll leave in the description. Talk to anyone like that who, you know, is there for you, because there will be someone there for you wherever, and it's just it's brilliant that someone like Alex is here and feels okay with sharing this, because everyone, it's horrible, because I've only known Alex for a very short time, but even then, you can tell when people are, trustworthy. You can tell when they're sound, and then I could always tell this with Alex, and the fact that then, all this time, I say a couple of months that I've known him, there could have been a problem going on there, and behind the happy facade, it's really, really horrible. It's horrible to think, you know, that there's someone's out there, and there could be someone of your best friends at home could be thinking, you know, these thoughts, and you will never know about it. So please just talk to everyone. That's all I will say. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, everyone. I do hope you did take something from this, and the documentary will be out very soon. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.